Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Kat Zempolic, co-founder and vice president and director at Morgan's Message and co-host of the Mental Matchup. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Hopeful Conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah. So where should we start? Do you want to talk about Morgan's Message and fill our listeners in?
I would love to. Morgan's Message was founded in July of 2020 to honor Morgan Rogers, who was a teammate of mine at Duke, also a close friend, who died by suicide in July of 2019. So around like her birthday in 2020, a group of us kind of got together and sparked a conversation along the lines of like, there have to be more Morgans out there who are suffering and who maybe don't have the support system or the resources or whatever it may be. So what can we do for those student athletes and those people that we maybe didn't or couldn't have done for Morgan? And so from that, at its core, that's kind of what drove us to start Morgan's Message. And that's been our North Star ever since starting.
Awesome. And the mission of Morgan's Message is like, how do we simplify that if it's possible?
It's a great question. I would say the mission, more eloquently put, you can head to morgansmessage.org. In my mind, it's really amplifying resources, stories, to help educate around like student athlete mental health and empower student athletes to really understand like what's going on in their own brain and, amplify the message of like talking about mental health within the student athlete community.
And mostly like D1 or college type athletes.
So we have a broad range. We have anyone from high school athletes to collegiate, doesn't matter what division, to even like post-college professional athletes we try to cater to, which is fantastic.
What kind of changes have you seen in the 4 years that you've been almost 5 years?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing that I've seen is a willingness to talk more openly about mental health, and I'll kind of give it from the angle of the podcast. I think there's nothing that hits closer to home or is like the best reminder in the world of like why I'm involved and do what I do than getting an email from a parent or from a student athlete who says like, hey, I listened to this episode and because of this episode, I felt like there were a lot of parallels in my life currently in this person, and them saying that they didn't know how to ask for help, but they started here was really inspiring. And, now my parents have helped me get into therapy or have helped like listen to me and are now, working with me on like, how do we support you? Like, I think that's the most impactful thing. So kind of just opening up, right, this avenue of having discussions about what I think is a really scary topic. I think like life or death is like death is a very deep and kind of daunting thing. And when it comes to mental health and not really understanding what's going on in your own brain, that's also very scary. And you pair the two together. And I think there are a lot of young people and I'm like on the scale of life, like I am younger, but being like 18, 19, 20, you just don't know what you don't know. And I think when you're struggling, it can really feel like this is everything and there's nothing forward. And I think that can happen at any age, but especially when you're young, I think we're more like susceptible to some of that.
Yeah. I read about the mental matchup on morgansmessage.org, and it stuck out to me that the hardest matchup maybe for an athlete is against your own mind.
Yeah.
That's so true for even not just athletes, for humans. It's often our own mind that we are like trying to figure out, go against because we don't want to accept, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, like as I look back on like my life and like I think being an athlete, there's this angle of your value as a human, where like I'll preface this by saying that just like existing, you have value. Like things you do, they're not who you are, right? But I think like being an athlete, a lot of times the validation, the praise comes from doing something, right? Whether it's scoring a goal, whether it's getting an award. And I think like from a young age, athletes are predisposed and like preconditioned to, if I do something good, I get praise and I am treated better, or I get that ice cream, or I get this, or I get that. And that tends to build on itself. And so I think we see a lot with athletes is like when they are no longer playing sports, or there's an injury, or there's something along those lines, that identity piece that's tied so closely together to athletics and where they really get a lot of their validation and their confidence, it can be earth shattering. So I think it's very interesting in general, but I do think like your mind is your biggest asset, but I think it's also can be your biggest like hindrance to living life.
Mm-hmm. And I also read on your website, you are more than an athlete. And I feel like, I don't know, possibly because of my lived experience, like I lost my son and I feel like I'm more than Robbie's mom. I'm more than a mother. Like, I don't, I, like we get so focused on what we are doing in our particular stage of life versus being able to look a little bit beyond. It's very hard. It's just kind of the way we live in society.
Yeah, and I think part of that, and I'm not quite sure if this was a question or like a statement, but I think part of that, because I've been examining that in my life of like, where are these roles that we're playing and how do these titles impact like how we show up every day? And I think it's easy to kind of put yourself in different boxes in society when you are doing something or are right, like a mother, um, a friend, whatever it is, it's like that common connector to other people. And so I think it is hard at times to step back and say like, well, who am I without these roles? Like, what are my values? What do I enjoy doing? What fills my cup? Like, what, and that's, I don't think it's easy when like life moves so quickly, and when things become, your title, your role from, the birth of a son, or whether it's like starting a job and it goes on for years and years and years. So yeah, I think we find that with like athletes a lot is they have a hard time, whether they graduate or get that injury, right? Of like being like, oh wait, who am I outside of this? Like this is all I've known for the last, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years.
Yeah. How many years did you play lacrosse?
I was late to the game. I think I was around 12. So by the time I
Late
graduated,
to the game.
probably like 10 or 12. I know, isn't that crazy? A lot of my friends started in like second or third grade, and I was seventh or eighth. So yeah, a little
Talk
late to
about
the game.
identity.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you played in college.
I did. I played Division One at Duke, which was
And that
amazing.
was, what kind of lifestyle was that as a college student? Like that has to be very,
It's funny. I think like in my mind, I didn't know anything different. And I never really like fantasized or thought about like what college looked like without the sport. It just felt really natural to have, 4 hours a day to do lacrosse and, school and then like social. So I also really thrive on structure and thrive on routine. And so I think for me, like just my personality, I like being busy and doing things and feeling, I don't know, feeling like, okay, I need to get this done because I know I have XYZ coming up.
as a college athlete, did you have resources available from like your coaches or from the school for mental health needs the same level as physical health needs or not?
I don't think they were. I think there's been a ton of work in that arena, at least at Duke. And I'd like to think other schools since I graduated, which was like 6 or 8 years now. 6. Can I do math? Yeah, 7 years. 7 years. I think there's been a lot of strides forward as we've been hearing about these student athletes struggling with their mental health. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times it takes tragedy to get a broader group to kind of listen and make change. When I was in school, I don't think there was enough education about it, which is crazy. That was part of the reason we started Morgan's Message. Is in my mind, when Morgan passed, I was like, Duke is one of the top institutions, from like, law school to med school to, you name it. We have a huge endowment, and like we didn't have a sports psychiatrist on staff. Like we didn't have anyone specifically for these student athletes who are not only in like a high pressure situation performing on the field or on the court, right? It was like that and
Academics as well. Yeah.
and a lot of the Duke student athletes that I found were also very social, right? Like they were kind of this, I don't really like this term, but like well-rounded, where like they wanted to be able to do everything and do it really well. So they do have someone now, which is amazing. I mean, we had like an on-campus therapist, like group of therapists called CAPS, which were open to all Duke students. I never went there in undergrad. I went there in grad school, but yeah. So to answer your question, like not really, which is crazy to look back on, but now there's been strides.
That's good. That's good. And there's different needs for a student athlete, for psychologists and coaching because of the pressures that are brought to the field and just the lifestyle that you're living, like the expectations.
Yeah, it's a lot, and I think on top of all of the external, there's a lot of internal pressure that student athletes tend to put on themselves, to be better, to be the best. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a pressure cooker,
A pressure cooker. Yeah. Oh, the internal pressures. Yeah. Can you give me an example of an internal pressure that an athlete might?
Yeah, like I think like when I was in school, right, it was like senior year. You are put into a role where maybe you're not a captain, but you're an upperclassman and you're in this leadership position. So you're trying to model, what you want the freshmen to do. You're trying to show up to practice early. You want to hit all the reps correctly in the drill. You want to be the first one in the drill. You want to be the first one to the field, last one to leave. You want to recover properly. And then you're also in school wrapping up your, second to last semester, where maybe you're taking some harder classes because it's the fall and you're not traveling as much. So you're going to study hall or you're going to the library and studying for 4 hours straight. And on top of it, you're thinking about this existential question of like, lacrosse school ends in May. What am I going to do with my career? Where am I going to live? Do I want to maybe go to grad school? Do I need to network with these people? Like, I think it's like all these different things that are like running through your brain. And then on top of it, it's like, this is my last year of school. Like, I need to be going out on Friday night. Like, I want to hang out with my friends. This is the last time we're all going to be in one place together. Like, Saturday morning, I want to go take that yoga class with, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's like all of these things all at once, trying to like do your best at everything when like that's not necessarily realistic.
Oh, wow. Interesting. What's your best piece of advice for a student athlete to be able to balance and have good mental health and perform on the field and be a good student in the classroom and enjoy their
Yeah,
life?
I got great advice my senior year actually, and it was like balance doesn't exist. And when I think about life, like there's a lot of trade-offs in life, and it all comes down to like what you really prioritize. And I think in that framework, what you prioritize should probably be like 50-50 things you have to do, things that bring you joy. And like when you make a commitment to do something, to play a sport, like you have to be all in on that commitment. right? And so like it might be 50% of the time it's something I have to do, but you have to figure out how the other part of that time, can you get joy out of it? Or can you be happy putting on your cleats? Or maybe it's like I pick a certain person to pass with, right? Or I get some of my social time going to the field early. So I think it comes down to kind of like, for student athletes listening, like making a list of like what you're passionate about, what you like, and kind of figuring out, how do I make time for these things? And maybe that means that other things go away. I don't know, everyone's different, but that's kind of my take on it.
Balance doesn't exist. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's something we're always like trying to find.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't think, like I don't know, like I think about my day to day, like some days I am a great fiance and I am not necessarily great at work, but I make sure like I do XYZ, I take my dog out, like, and sometimes like that's just the trade-off for that day, right? And maybe the next day it's like, okay, I'm really great at work today, but I'm coming home late. I wasn't able to like get this stuff on my to-do list done, but that doesn't mean that I'm like any less than what I am. I just don't think like you can do, there's not enough hours in the day. And like for me, it's like trying to do, I think I had a hard time my sophomore and junior year of college, and a little bit after COVID, getting back into like, you know, being social and re-entering the world, where I did try to do a lot. And it was really hard and I got burnt out and I was constantly sick and my body was like fighting me trying to like be everything for everyone and everywhere at once, that I've like learned, you know, that's like, you need to prioritize kind of yourself, but going back to like, okay, what matters to me and what do I have to do?
Are you grateful for the experience of being a student athlete in college? Like, how do you think it changed you as a young adult?
Loaded question. It's been, yeah, I look back and like being a student athlete, I was really grateful for my experience. I mean, I don't know if I do it all over again, because I don't know if I could do it again a second time, but I'm so grateful for every second that I had doing it. And I think it's really shaped like everything about me, from relationships to like being on a team. What does teamwork really mean? You know, to like finding, you know, how do you juggle multiple priorities at once? I say like, if I can do 4 years at Duke playing lacrosse, I can do anything. Like that's kind of my mindset now, is like being in that environment where everything was like go, 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 try to be good at what you're doing. I think now, like I go back to that and I'm still like, I don't know how I did it. But it was amazing. It was amazing.
What do you want to share about Morgan? I read that she was great qualities, like athlete, artist, an animal
Yes.
lover, and maybe was covering up her smile with a mask, or just always smiling and just not, maybe
Yeah.
wasn't true.
She was like the definition of a goofball. Freak athlete, like the most athletic person I've ever met. Probably could pick up anything within like a day, like just crazy athletic. She loved to like make little dancing videos. Like she'd put on like Justin Bieber and she'd dance. She was so thoughtful. I was in grad school when she was in like her senior year, and I'd go over for Sunday dinners. And before I'd go over, she'd be like, "What do you want tonight? Like, do you want the ramen salad? Do you want berries? What berries can I get you?" Because she'd be like, "You're so stressed. Like, let me like make you a dinner." And then she'd make more than what we needed so that I'd have leftovers for dinner the next night, which like, she was just so thoughtful and she cared so deeply about the people around her. Like it
Mm-hmm.
brings tears to my eyes to like think about her, because she was such a light.
Did she ever let anybody know that she was struggling?
So she had a really bad ACL injury her sophomore year, and I was injured around the same time. And That I
Mm.
think kind of was like the catalyst for some of the struggles with mental health. I mean, you go back to identity, right? Like identity totally ripped away from her when she like associated herself with being kind of like athlete first. Um, and then that injury was like, I would say she had dealt with it. She dealt with it for probably like 2 years up until she ended up stepping away from the team the fall before her like senior spring kind of. And I think like that you could tell she was struggling. Truthfully, I was always worried about her during the injury, and it kind of ebbed and flowed, and I was close enough to it where I was able to ask her, how are you doing? And when she ended up stepping away from the team and was just like a student and played club lacrosse, it seemed like she was back to normal. Like it
Uh,
was like Morgan was back. She felt lighter, there was no longer this pressure to like be through rehab and playing on the field. And it was all about kind of like, okay, I'm just going to do school and I'm going to really enjoy club lacrosse. And that I think was why when she passed, it was really shocking because like for those 6 months prior, I had seen like, freshman year Morgan, like the Morgan who was like singing along to songs and like dancing around and being goofy. And so I think that, like, I know you asked, like, did she seem like she was struggling? Short answer, yes, but no, because it felt like it was out of left field at that point.
How do you bring Morgan into Morgan's Message as one of the founders and as the on your podcast? I'm sure her spirit is always there.
Yeah, I think like again, she's kind of our North Star. Like my goal in the organization personally is like if we can help one Morgan, like if we can help someone else's Morgan, even if it's just one person, then this is great, right? Like then we're successful. And I really try to just like, keep her in mind as I'm having conversations, as I'm like talking with people, right? I like to talk about her, what she was like. And I also like to highlight like losing someone is not easy, but like this is why we need to talk about mental health so that we're not losing more people, so that people feel like they can raise a hand, can get help, can learn more, can support their loved ones.
Yeah, we still have work to do.
Oh, there's so much work to be done. It's not even, yeah. But I do feel, at least in my realm, which is like a small sliver of the world, I do feel like conversations are more open than they were even like 4 years ago, right? When we started, which I will take as a win. I don't think the world unfortunately changes overnight. But in like little bits over time.
I like your attitude. That'll keep you going. It's because it can be easy to get into that, each day or hear a negative story and feel like we're not doing enough and that there
Yeah.
is the weight versus looking at the positives. Oh goodness. What are you most proud of with Morgan's Message?
Um I am really proud of the growth we've been able to achieve in such a short amount of time. The podcast is just one part of like a bigger whole. We have an incredible ambassador program where we're on over 3,000 campuses, both high school and college, with over, I think, like 6,000 ambassadors who are hosting, monthly meetings in their direct communities to talk about mental health or to educate on different topics. So I think I'm really proud of the group of us that came together and what we've been able to do out of like honestly like a really hard conversation of like what could we have done, right?
Awesome. I'm sure Morgan is very proud and happy that you are all doing the work that you're doing. I think that's cool that there's so many of you together. Like this came out of celebrating her birthday after she had passed. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really special.
What would you tell somebody who's struggling? What's your best piece of or just a little bit of wisdom there?
Ooh, yeah. Um, it's really cliche, but you're not alone. I think at the core, when you're struggling with your mental health, you tend to isolate yourself and you think, I'm the only one going through this. No one's going to understand.
Hmm.
No one's going to be able to hear me. No one's going to be able to help me. It would be easier, if this was done. And like the thought that I challenge is like, you're not alone. Like there will be someone who will help you, and you have to give those people the chance to. I think a lot of times, like, we lose a lot of faith in our support system when our brain is going haywire and we're dealing with depression and anxiety. And the thing we want to do is turn inward when like we should turn outward. And I genuinely think like one conversation can really flip the script of how you're feeling.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't, that alone piece, why we feel alone. Like no one else thinks this way about themselves, or nobody else could understand, versus so many feelings are just mutual and shared.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about social media?
Oh, yeah. So I'm like not I'm not big on social media. I think like there are pros and there are cons. Um, for me, I found there were a lot of cons associated, and I actually like kind of revamped my whole relationship with social media to try to minimize like the anxiousness that I was feeling. And some of it was driven by people who weren't even really in my life anymore, but I would see their posts and I'd be like, I want to be there. I have FOMO, or like, why didn't this person include me on this? And I kind of was like, this is not what this is for. So now I have an Instagram. That's it. It's like a bunch of random accounts, news accounts, and then it's really people in my circles who I genuinely want to know what's going on in their lives, but like I am barely ever posting. And the reason for that, this is such a long story for like a short
It's okay.
question. I deleted Instagram and I was off of it for probably like 8 months. And I found out, I called my friend and was trying to catch up with him. He plays professional soccer and he had gotten called up to the US training team. And I was like, what's new with you? What's going on? And he was like, oh, like, you'll never believe it. Like last month I got to do this amazing like US training camp. And I remember just being very upset that I was finding out a month later, because I was like, I need to be like, no one has the time. Like, you can call people every few months, but like checking in on them when we all have our own lives, we have like partners, we have careers, like all of these things, right? So I kind of in that moment was like, okay, I need to figure out a way to stay up to date with these people that I love so much and who are so valuable to me. And it seems like this is via Instagram for whatever. Like I'm not setting Google alerts. That's too much. But it's kind of like, okay, how can I protect my space while I navigate social media? And like that, ebbs and flows. Sometimes I'll delete the app and we'll come back like a week later. Um, but that was kind of the catalyst of like, okay, I need to be on it in some way, shape, or form, because I do want to know what people are doing who I love. But I don't need to be like an active member posting the highlight reel of my life. So
Mm, good life experience. Yeah. Where's that? We had that word balance. Like it's, how does it feed us to what we need versus what it wants to feed us, maybe what
yeah,
it's designed to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
social media is interesting. But I don't think it's going
Very.
away anytime soon. So
No, no.
part of the
Well,
new
maybe not,
norm.
maybe soon, because our TikTok is. We'll see.
Yep, I know, possibly. I don't know how they're gonna do that. But we'll see.
Yeah. And I may have been teasing. We don't know. I mean, it's such a different thing for probably, I'm a ton older than you, but social media it's part of almost everyone's lives on such a daily, hourly, all the time. And there's definitely a correlation between mental health and,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
one I don't think we've figured out as a society.
No, and I don't know. I feel very lucky that like my first phone was a flip phone that I got in 7th grade, and I only got it because my parents had no idea where I was. Like I'd go out and hang out with my friends and they'd be calling the landlines being like, "Okay, what house is she at? She needs to come home for dinner." So they got it because they were like, "You need to let us know where you are. Like you can't be you can't be like, bopping around on school nights." And then like the iPhone was introduced when I was in high school. Instagram really wasn't like a thing until college. So I feel really lucky that I didn't have that so young, because I think that like for me, yes, it's like right, like the screenager, people are addicted to their phones, they don't know how to make eye contact, like all of that, yes. But I think furthermore for like young women, they're seeing a lot of images of people who might be photoshopping or who are kind of like showing the highlights of like you need XYZ things to be happy, and I don't think that's like the best information to be taking in while your brain is forming and while you can't really decipher between like what's real and what's not. And so that's I think what scares me the most about social media. But I also feel really grateful that I didn't have it, because now like as I'm navigating, like I can tell, right, like okay, what's real, what's not, like and I know the difference, and I know what media I want to take in, and I know what media that I'm like block, delete, like please get out of my algorithm type thing.
Yeah. What's real and what isn't. I can't always decipher that at the age of 14.
Yeah.
Mm. This is a good conversation. It's important. I mean, I think there's little trinkets of just wisdom for listeners. We end all of our podcasts with the same question, and this you get to answer any way you would like. What does the world need to hear right now?
Ooh, what does the world need to hear right now? Be where your feet are. I I I find that I enjoy life a lot more when I live it where I am, and I'm not so focused on what's happening in a week or what happened a day ago, but rather being like really in the moment. So that's kind of my mantra is like be where your feet are, enjoy what you're doing. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, maybe your feet shouldn't be there, you know? So
I like that. Be where your feet are. Thank you so much for being a guest on Hopeful Conversations. To our listeners, remember to tune into our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends. Thanks so much.
thank you.